Hello, I'm here. I'd like to tell you a story about a killer who could go back in time. It all started when I was 10 years old and my father was brought home dead. The police called it a heart attack, but my mother always suspected foul play. There were no signs of forced entry and nothing was stolen, but someone had come into our house and killed my dad. Who would do such a thing? And why? To this day, we don't know the answer to those questions. I grew up with one overriding thought in my mind: get even with my father's killer. I wanted revenge. I wanted justice. Now, there are two ways a person can seek revenge. Either you let your emotions get the better of you and you act, or you bide your time and wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. I chose the second option. I knew that if I let my anger get the better of me, I would end up in prison for murder. I didn't want that. My father had already been murdered once. I wasn't going to make things worse by adding another notch to my prison cell door. I waited for my chance, and when it came, I didn't hesitate. The man I killed had a name. His name was Victor. He lived in the apartment across from us. I had watched him come and go for years. I knew his habits, his likes and dislikes. I knew everything about him. Why? Because I had to. It was the only way I could ensure that I would get even with him. Victor and I had never had an altercation before. We didn't know each other well enough for that. But I had seen the fear in my mother's eyes whenever he looked at her, and I had seen the hatred in his eyes whenever he looked at me. All these years, I had studied him, waited for him to let his guard down, and when he did, I struck. He was walking his dog. I was out on my evening constitutional as well, and I knew just the place where he would let his guard down. We crossed paths, and he gave me that look, the same look that haunted my nightmares for years. But I didn't falter. I kept my eyes fixed on his. This is it, I thought. This is my chance. And as he reached out to pet the dog, I plunged the knife into his chest. It was swift and clean. He didn't even have time to react before I pulled the knife out and plunged it in again and again and again. He fell to his knees, blood gushing out of his mouth. And then he looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You don't understand," I said, kneeling beside him. "You don't understand what?" He choked on his own blood. "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because you killed my father. Because you made my mother afraid to walk down the street. Because you destroyed my family." He tried to speak, but all that came out was a gurgle. I stood up and dusted off my clothes. It was over. Finally, after all these years, it was over. I walked away, leaving him to die in the street. The next day, they caught him. They found his prints on the walls of our house and the fibers from the carpet in his clothes. He confessed to killing my father, but he wouldn't say why. All he kept saying was that my dad had it coming. That wasn't good enough for me. I wanted more answers. So I went to see him in prison. He was serving a life sentence, but he didn't seem remorseful. In fact, when he looked at me, I saw the same look I had seen in his eyes all those years ago. The look of a predator who had just smelled fear. That's when I realized he wasn't afraid of going to prison. In fact, he seemed kind of excited about it. Maybe it was the only place he felt safe. Maybe it was the only place he felt like he belonged. We never did find out what Victor's motive was. He died in prison a few years later, and with him, my chance at revenge died as well. Was it worth it? I honestly don't know. Some days I think about my father and the life we had before he died. Other days I think about Victor and the years I wasted hating him, plotting against him, waiting for my chance. In the end, it didn't bring my father back. It didn't bring our family back together. All it did was waste a big chunk of my life.